Legend of the Human and the Tiger Cubs. Part 1. The stars looked different through the viewport. Captain Day-Wan had been staring at them for 3 hours straight, watching the infinite darkness between distant suns. He was tired, the kind of tired that came from 6 months of hauling cargo across empty space with only 3 other people to talk to. The ship hummed beneath his feet. The steadfast Horizon was not a beautiful vessel. It was old, patched in a dozen places, and smelled faintly of recycled air and engine oil, but it was his command and he was proud of it. The cargo hold was full of medical supplies and school materials for the colony on New Hanum. Good work. Honest work. Hana sat at the navigation console, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. She was young, barely 25, but she could plot a jump through hyperspace better than anyone Day-Wan had ever worked with. In the corner, Tae-Yang was elbow-deep in an access panel, cursing softly at some stubborn wire. The engineer always found something to fix. Yuna, their medical officer, was in the crew quarters, probably reading another one of her ancient paper books. "Jump point in 5 minutes, Captain," Hana said without looking up. Day-Wan nodded. "Good, let's get this done. I'm ready to sleep in a real bed." Tae-Yang laughed from his corner. "The colony beds aren't much better than ours." "At least they don't vibrate when the engines fire," Day-Wan replied. The minutes ticked by. Day-Wan watched the countdown on the main display. Hyperspace jumps were routine, something he had done hundreds of times. The ship would fold space around itself, slip through the gap, and emerge light years away in the blink of an eye. Safe. Simple. Boring. The countdown hit 0. The universe twisted. Something was wrong immediately. Day-Wan felt it in his stomach, a pulling sensation that should not be there. The ship's alarm screamed to life. Red lights flooded the bridge. Hana's hands flew across her controls, trying to stabilize their entry into hyperspace. "We hit something," she shouted. "Some kind of gravity well. It's not on any charts." The ship shook violently. Day-Wan grabbed his chair to keep from falling. Through the viewport, he saw hyperspace collapsing around them, the swirling colors of folded reality tearing apart like wet paper. They were being pulled back into normal space, but not cleanly. "Not safely. Tae-Yang, I need engines." Day-Wan barked. "Working on it." The engineer was at his console now, fingers flying. "Main drive is offline. We're coming out of hyperspace at speed." Yuna burst onto the bridge. "What's happening?" Before anyone could answer, the ship lurched sideways. The viewport filled with green and blue. A planet. They were falling toward a planet. "Hana, find me somewhere soft to land." Day-Wan was already strapping into his seat. "There is no soft. It's all jungle." "Captain, we're coming in too fast." Day-Wan's mind raced. "Everyone, crash positions now." "Tae-Yang, cut all power to non-essential systems and route it to shields." The crew scrambled to obey. The ship screamed through the atmosphere, metal groaning under the stress. Through the viewport, Day-Wan could see trees, endless green trees rushing up to meet them. The ship's computer was screaming warnings about hull integrity, about temperature, about 1,000 things that no longer mattered. "Brace," he shouted. The steadfast horizon hit the jungle canopy like a meteor. Trees exploded around them. The ship flipped, tumbled, and crashed through vegetation that had stood for centuries. Day-Wan felt his ribs crack against the restraints. His head smashed against something hard. The world became a blur of green and pain and the terrible sound of tearing metal. Then darkness. When Day-Wan woke, everything hurt. His head throbbed with each heartbeat. His chest felt like someone had beaten it with a hammer. He tried to move and gasped as pain shot through his left leg. Broken. Definitely broken. The bridge was dark except for a few flickering emergency lights. Smoke filled the air. Day-Wan coughed and immediately regretted it as his ribs protested. He fumbled with his restraints and finally got them open. "Hana?" His voice was rough. "Tae-Yang, Yuna." Silence answered him. Day-Wan pulled himself out of his chair, using only his right leg and his arms. The pain was incredible, but he pushed through it. He had to find his crew. In the dim light, he could see Hana slumped over her console. He dragged himself to her, reached for her neck to check for a pulse. Nothing. His heart sank. He checked again, hoping he was wrong, but there was no mistake. Hana was gone. A piece of the console had torn free during the crash and pierced her chest. Death had been instant. Day-Wan closed his eyes and took a shaking breath. Then he moved on. He had to check the others. He found Tai Yang in the corridor leading to engineering. The engineer had been thrown against a bulkhead with such force that his neck had snapped. He was already cold. Yuna was in the crew quarters, trapped under a collapsed beam. She was still breathing, but barely. "Captain?" Her voice was weak, bubbling. "Internal bleeding, I'm here. I'm going to get you out." Daewon tried to lift the beam, but with his broken leg and cracked ribs, he could barely move it. "Don't," Yuna whispered. "Too late. I can feel it." "Yuna, no. Just hold on. Listen." She coughed and blood flecked her lips. "You have to survive. Get the beacon working. Call for help. I will. Just stay with me." But even as he said it, he knew it was over. Yuna's breathing became more labored, more wet. She looked at him with frightened eyes and tried to say something else, but the words would not come. Then her chest stopped moving, and the light faded from her eyes. Daewon sat there in the darkness with Yuna's body for a long time. He wanted to scream. He wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all. But he was too tired, too hurt, and too alone. Finally, he moved. Yuna had told him to survive, and he would honor that. He dragged himself through the wreckage, collecting anything useful. A medkit, emergency rations, a plasma cutter, the communication beacon, damaged but possibly repairable. He found the least destroyed section of the ship and made it his shelter. Using supplies from the medkit, he splinted his broken leg and wrapped his ribs as best he could. He ate a ration bar that tasted like cardboard and drank recycled water that tasted like metal. As the light faded outside, Daewon heard sounds from the jungle. Roars, clicking noises, things moving through the undergrowth. This planet was not empty. He was not alone here, but he had never felt more alone in his life. He sealed the door to his shelter and tried not to think about his daughter Bomi back on Earth, or about the bodies of his crew cooling in the wreckage around him. He tried not to think about anything at all. Tomorrow he would figure out how to survive. Tonight he just needed to make it until morning. Legend of the Human and the Tiger Cubs. Part 2. 3 days had passed since the crash. Daewon's leg still throbbed with every movement, but the splint held. His ribs hurt less when he breathed shallow breaths. He had learned to move quietly through the wreckage, gathering supplies and trying not to attract attention from whatever lived in the jungle outside. The jungle was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Massive trees stretched toward the sky, their trunks as wide as houses. Strange flowers bloomed in colors that Daewon had never seen before. Birds with 4 wings called to each other in the canopy, but there were also predators. He had heard them hunting at night, their roars shaking the ground. On the morning of the 4th day, Daewon knew he needed water. The ship's recycling system was damaged, and his supplies were running low. He had spotted a stream from the crash site, maybe half a kilometer away through the jungle. It was dangerous, but he had no choice. He took the plasma cutter and a container for water. Moving through the jungle with a broken leg was slow work. Every few steps he had to stop and rest. Sweat poured down his face despite the cool morning air, but he made it to the stream without seeing any predators. The water was clear and cold. Daewon filled his container and used a purification tablet from the medkit. While he waited for it to work, he sat on a fallen log and listened to the jungle sounds. For a moment, he could almost forget he was stranded on an alien world. Then he heard something else, a sound that did not fit with the birds and insects, a wet tearing noise, and underneath it a weak crying sound that made his blood run cold. Daewon stood up, ignoring the pain in his leg. He followed the sound, moving as quietly as he could through the undergrowth. What he found made him stop in his tracks. 2 massive creatures lay dead in a small clearing. They were like nothing Daewon had ever seen. Each one was over 2 meters tall, with powerful bodies covered in fur that was striped in blues and grays. Their heads were broad with strong jaws. Their paws ended in wicked claws as long as his fingers. They looked like tigers but alien, wrong in ways he could not quite name. Something had killed them, something with teeth and claws even bigger than theirs. The bodies were torn open, scattered across the clearing. The sight made Daewon's stomach turn, but then he heard the crying again. Near the bodies, partially hidden under some leaves, were 3 small shapes. Cubs, baby versions of the dead creatures. They were no bigger than human infants with soft fur and closed eyes. They mewed weakly, searching for their parents who would never answer. Daewon's first thought was to run. These were predators, alien predators. Their kind might have killed his crew. They would grow up to be dangerous. Getting involved was stupid, but he could not make his feet move away. The cubs cried, and in their cries he heard his daughter Bomi. He remembered holding her when she was tiny, remembered how she would cry when she was hungry or scared. These creatures were not human, but they were babies. They were alone and dying. Day One cursed himself for being soft. But he moved forward anyway. The cubs smelled him coming and tried to crawl away, but they were too weak. Day One knelt down carefully, mindful of his broken leg. Up close he could see how thin they were. Without their mother to feed them, they would not last another day. He reached out slowly. The cubs hissed and tried to scratch him with tiny claws, but there was no strength behind it. Day One scooped them up as gently as he could. They were surprisingly warm, their hearts beating fast against his chest. "It's okay," he said, knowing they could not understand. "I've got you." The journey back to the ship was harder with 3 cubs in his arms. They squirmed and cried, and his leg screamed with every step. But Day One kept going. When he finally made it back to his shelter, he was exhausted. He set the cubs down on a blanket and looked at them properly. They were identical, impossible to tell apart. 2 seemed slightly bigger than the third. He would need to name them if he was going to keep them alive. "Juan," he said, pointing to the biggest one. "Suk," for the second. And Jin, for the smallest, who looked at him with eyes that were just starting to open. The next problem was food. The cubs needed milk, but Day One had no idea what these creatures ate. He accessed the ship's damaged computer and searched through the biological database. The computer analyzed the bits of fur he had collected and made some guesses. High protein, fat content similar to Earth mammals, specific amino acids. Day One mixed together some of the emergency rations with water and fat supplements from the medical supplies. The result was a gray paste that smelled terrible. He hoped it would work. He dipped his finger in the paste and held it near Juan's mouth. The cub sniffed it suspiciously, then licked it off. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Juan's little tongue came out again, seeking more. "That's it," Day One encouraged. "Eat." He fed all 3 cubs slowly, carefully. They ate like they were starving, which they were. When they finished, they curled up together on the blanket and fell asleep immediately. Day One watched them sleep and wondered what he had gotten himself into. The days turned into weeks. Feeding the cubs became a routine. 3 times a day he would mix the paste and feed them. They grew stronger quickly, their eyes opening fully to reveal golden irises that seemed to glow in the dim light. Their fur became thicker and shinier. Day One learned their personalities. Juan was bold and curious, always trying to explore beyond the shelter. Suk was quieter but smart, watching everything carefully before acting. Jin was the smallest but the most affectionate, always trying to sleep curled against Day One's side. As they grew, their claws became sharper. Day One had to teach them to be gentle. When they scratched him during play, he would say no firmly and pull away. They learned quickly. When they bit too hard, he would tap their noses softly. They did not like that, but they understood. He built a bigger shelter using materials from the ship. He set traps in the jungle and caught small animals to supplement his food. The cubs loved fresh meat and would purr deeply when he gave it to them. He found a way to purify water from the stream in larger quantities. 2 months passed. The cubs were now the size of large dogs, growing faster than any earth animal. They followed Day One everywhere, learning to hunt by watching him check his traps. They played together, wrestling and pouncing on each other. At night, they slept around him like a warm, furry wall. Day One knew he should still be afraid of them. They were becoming powerful predators. But when Juan brought him a small creature he had caught, laying it at Day One's feet like a gift, the human could not help but smile. These were not just animals he was keeping alive. They were becoming family. Legend of the Human and the Tiger Cubs, a 5-part HFY Sci-Fi Story outline Part 1. The Crash. The story opens in the year 2347, aboard the human cargo vessel Steadfast Horizon. Captain Day One commands a small crew transporting medical supplies and educational materials to the Outer Rim colony of New Hanam. The ship is crewed by Hana, navigator, Taeyang, engineer, and Yuna, medical officer. During a routine hyperspace jump, the ship encounters an uncharted gravity well that tears them back into normal space. The vessel suffers catastrophic damage and crash lands on an uncharted jungle planet designated P7743. The crash kills Taeyang and Yuna instantly. Hana survives but is critically injured, trapped in the wreckage. Day 1, suffering from a broken leg and severe lacerations, manages to free himself. He spends hours trying to reach Hana, but she dies from her injuries before he can extract her. Alone and grief-stricken, Day 1 salvages what he can from the wreckage: a medkit, emergency rations, a plasma cutter, and a damaged communication beacon. As night falls, Day 1 hears disturbing sounds in the jungle, roars and clicking noises unlike anything in the human database. He fortifies his position in the least damaged section of the ship, not knowing that this planet is home to the Talon, a tiger-like alien species that has not yet achieved spaceflight, but possesses sophisticated tribal technology and fierce territorial instincts. Part 2. The Cubs on his third day of survival. While searching for water, Day 1 discovers a grisly scene. 2 adult Talon lie dead, their bodies torn apart by some massive predator. The aliens are massive, standing over 2 meters tall with striped fur patterns in blues and grays, powerful limbs and retractable claws. Near their bodies, Day 1 finds 3 small cubs, no larger than human infants, mewling weakly. Every instinct tells him to leave. These are alien predators, and their kind likely killed his crew or would kill him if given the chance. But Day 1 sees the cubs starving, and something in their cries reminds him of his own daughter, Bomi, whom he left behind on Earth years ago to take this posting. Against his better judgment, Day 1 takes the cubs back to his shelter. He names them Huan, Suk, and Jin, simple names he can remember. Using his limited knowledge and the medical database, he manages to formulate a protein paste from the ship's emergency rations that the cubs can digest. They're weak, but they begin to recover. Days turn into weeks. Day 1 learns the cubs' behaviors, their communication clicks and purrs, their playfulness despite their dire circumstances. He teaches them boundaries, gently redirecting when their claws come out during play. He builds a larger shelter, sets traps for local game, and purifies water from a nearby stream. The cubs begin to grow rapidly, far faster than human children. Within 2 months, they're the size of large dogs, and Day 1 realizes these creatures are apex predators in development. Yet they treat him with affection, bringing him their catches, sleeping curled against him for warmth, protecting him from the jungle's dangers. Part 3. The tribe 4 months after the crash, Day 1's makeshift family encounters other Talon. A hunting party of 6 warriors tracks the cubs sent to Day 1's shelter. The warriors are shocked to find the cubs alive and even more shocked to find them with a strange, weak-looking alien. The leader, a scarred female named Rena, makes to kill Day 1 immediately. But the cubs, now nearly adult-sized, place themselves between Day 1 and the warriors, growling in his defense. Huan, the boldest, even strikes at Rena when she advances. This behavior is unprecedented. The Talon have never seen such loyalty from cubs to a creature outside their species. After tense moments, an elder warrior named Sion recognizes the scent markings on the dead adults. They were his sister and her mate. He demands to know how the soft skin came to care for his kin. Using gestures, drawings in the dirt, and patience, Day 1 explains the crash, finding the cubs, and his months of care. The Talon are deeply suspicious, but Sion notes the cubs are healthy, strong, and well-trained. He calls for a tribal council. Day 1 is brought to the Talon village, a sprawling settlement of carved wooden structures and sophisticated stone architecture hidden in the jungle canopy. The village elder Bora presides over his fate. The tribe is divided. Some see him as a resourceful being worthy of respect, others as a weak alien who will bring danger. The cubs' passionate defense of Day 1, combined with Sion's testimony and the visible bond between them, sways Bora. She declares Day 1 Claw Brother, an honorary member of the tribe. He is allowed to stay, but he must learn their ways and prove himself useful. Part 4. The Iron Sky Day 1 spends the next year integrating into Talon society. He learns their language, their customs, and their history. The Talon are a warrior culture, but also artists, storytellers, and inventors on the cusp of an industrial age. Day 1 shares human knowledge carefully, medicine, agriculture techniques, and basic engineering, helping the tribe without overwhelming their culture. Huan, Suk, and Jin mature into formidable warriors, but they remain bonded to Day 1, often seeking his counsel and protection. Other Talon begin to respect the human, noting his strategic mind, his endurance despite physical weakness, and his unwavering loyalty to those he protects. Then, disaster strikes. A massive starship appears in the sky, a vessel from the Vrax Dominion, a ruthless empire that enslaves pre-spaceflight species for labor and genetic experimentation. The Vrax have discovered P7743 and its valuable resources. They send landing parties to capture specimens. The first Vrax raiding party attacks the Talon village with energy weapons and captured drones. The Talon fight bravely, but their claws and spears are useless against shielded armor. Dozens are captured, including young cubs and elders. Daewon recognizes the technology and knows what's at stake. He retrieves his salvaged plasma cutter and the few working pieces of human tech from the crash site. He teaches the Talon guerrilla warfare tactics, ambushes, traps, hit-and-run attacks. Most importantly, he shows them how to target the Vrax equipment's weak points. Under Daewon's guidance, the Talon launch a coordinated counterattack. They sabotage the Vrax landing craft, rescue their captured kin, and kill several Vrax soldiers. But Daewon knows it's temporary. More Vrax will come, and in greater numbers. Part 5. The legend begins. Daewon makes a desperate plan. Using components from his crashed ship and captured Vrax technology, he builds a transmitter powerful enough to reach human space. He sends a distress signal with detailed coordinates, identifying the Vrax presence and the endangered species that needs protection. While waiting for help that may never come, Daewon organizes the entire Talon population for war. He fortifies their villages, trains warriors in advanced tactics, and helps them forge weapons from scavenged Vrax metal. Hwan, Suk, and Jin become war leaders, commanding their own units with fierce pride. The Vrax send a full battalion, 200 soldiers with gunships and heavy armor. The battle is brutal. The Talon lose many warriors, but they fight with ferocity and cunning, using the jungle terrain to their advantage. Daewon leads a strike team directly to the Vrax command center, where he personally detonates explosives that cripple their communications. Just as the Talon lines begin to break, human warships arrive, a response to Daewon's signal. The Earth Alliance fleet decimates the Vrax forces and drives them off-planet. The Talon are saved, but at great cost. Nearly a quarter of the tribe has fallen. The human commanders offer to relocate Daewon back to civilization, but he refuses. This is his home now. These are his people. The Alliance agrees to place P7743 under protected status, preventing any foreign exploitation. Years pass. Daewon ages among the Talon, becoming a living legend. The soft skin who raised cubs, taught warriors, and saved a species. When he finally dies of old age, the entire Talon nation mourns. Hwan, Suk, and Jin, now elders, themselves, carry his body to a place of honor in the highest trees. The Talon name the planet Daewon, prime in his honor, and pass down the legend of the human who proved that strength isn't measured in claws or fangs, but in courage, loyalty, and the willingness to stand for those who cannot stand for themselves. Themes found family across species barriers, humanity's capacity for compassion and adaptation, the strength of loyalty and mutual respect, cultural exchange without domination, the definition of strength beyond physical prowess, sacrifice and legacy, epilogue possibilities. Hwan's descendants become the first Talon to achieve spaceflight, naming their first starship after Daewon. The Human-Talon alliance becomes legendary in the galaxy, a model for interspecies cooperation. Bomi, Daewon's daughter, eventually travels to Daewon Prime and meets the descendants of the cubs her father raised. The story of Daewon inspires humanity to prioritize protection of developing species throughout explored space. Legend of the Human and the Tiger Cubs. Part 4. 1 year had passed since Daewon arrived at the village. The small platform home had become familiar. He had learned the Talon language, though his clicking sounds were clumsy compared to theirs. They had learned some of his words too. A mixing of two worlds, Hwan, Suk, and Jin were fully grown now, powerful warriors who commanded respect. But they still came to Daewon's home every evening, still curled up near him when they slept. The bond between them was known throughout the village. Some Talon thought it strange, others thought it beautiful. Daewon had proven useful to the village. He showed them how to make simple medicines from plants, mixing them in ways the Talon had never considered. He helped them improve their farming, teaching them crop rotation and irrigation systems. He shared knowledge carefully, never pushing, always respecting their culture and ways. The Talon shared their knowledge with him in return. They taught him to move silently through the jungle. They showed him which plants were safe and which were poison. They trained him to fight with a spear, laughing at his clumsy attempts but praising when he improved. Bora, the village elder, often called Daewon to her home for long talks. She was curious about the stars, about other worlds, about his people. He told her stories of Earth, of cities that reached into the sky, of ships that sailed between stars. She listened and remembered everything. Then one morning, the sky changed. Daewon was helping Sion repair a bridge when he saw it. A star that moved wrong, a bright light that grew larger. His heart turned to ice. It was a ship, a massive starship entering orbit. The Talon noticed too. They pointed at the sky, clicking questions. What was it? Was it another like Daewon? Was it dangerous? Daewon ran to his old shelter where he had stored his salvaged equipment. He pulled out a damaged scanner and got it working. When he saw the readings, his blood ran cold. The ship was not human. The design was Vrax. The Vrax Dominion, an empire that conquered primitive worlds and enslaved their people. Daewon had studied them in the academy. They were ruthless. They were efficient. And they had found this planet. He ran back to the village, his leg aching with the speed. He found Bora and tried to explain. Danger, bad people from sky. They take Talon, make slaves. Bora's one good eye narrowed. Fight? Yes, must fight. But their weapons very strong. That afternoon, the first Vrax landing party came down. 3 ships, each carrying a dozen soldiers in powered armor. They landed near the village and immediately began scanning the area. The Talon warriors, led by Rena, attacked first. They were brave and fierce, leaping from the trees with spears and claws ready. But their weapons bounced off the Vrax energy shields. The alien soldiers fired back with weapons that stunned and captured rather than killed. Within minutes, 20 Talon were caught in energy nets, unable to move. The Vrax soldiers loaded them into transport containers like cargo. Daewon watched from hiding, his fists clenched. He recognized this tactic. The Vrax wanted specimens, healthy, strong examples of this new species. When the landing party left with their captives, the village was in chaos. Families wailed for their lost members. Warriors roared in anger. Bora called for calm, but even she looked shaken. Daewon gathered the village leaders, Bora, Rena, Sion, and a few others. Listen, I know these enemies. I know how they fight. Through a mix of Talon words and gestures, he explained what they faced. The Vrax would return with more soldiers. They would take more Talon. Eventually, they would take everyone, unless the Talon fought back in ways the Vrax did not expect. Your warriors are strong, Daewon said. But strong alone is not enough. Must be smart. Must attack from hiding. Must strike and run away. Strike and run away. Again and again, Rena clicked angrily. We are warriors. We do not run. Running to live and fight again is not coward, Daewon responded. Is smart. These enemies cannot see through trees good. Cannot hear like Talon. Cannot smell like Talon. Use these. Make them afraid. Bora considered his words. Finally, she clicked her agreement. Show us. Daewon spent the next 2 days teaching. He showed them how to make traps using their jungle as a weapon. Pits covered with leaves that would break under the weight of armored soldiers. Tripwires connected to logs that would swing down from the trees. Simple things, but effective. He went to his old crash site and salvaged what he could. The plasma cutter became a weapon. Power cells became explosives. He showed a few trusted Talon how to use them safely. Most importantly, he taught them to target weaknesses. The Vrax shields were strong at the front but weaker at the joints. The sensors in their helmets could be blinded by bright flashes. Their communication devices could be damaged with precise strikes. Huan, Suk, and Jin became his strongest supporters. They led younger warriors in practice raids, teaching them the new tactics. The 3 cubs who Daewon had saved were now warriors themselves, and their loyalty to him inspired others to trust his strange ideas. When the Vrax returned 5 days later, they came with 50 soldiers and heavy weapons. They expected another easy raid. What they got was a nightmare. The Talon attacked from the trees, from the shadows, from places the Vrax could not see. Spears struck at the weak points in armor. Traps caught soldiers and left them helpless. When the Vrax tried to chase their attackers, the Talon vanished into the jungle like ghosts. Daewon led a small team to the Vrax landing craft. While the soldiers were distracted by the main fighting, he used the plasma cutter to sabotage their ships. One by one, the engines failed. The Vrax were stranded. In the confusion, the Talon rescued their captured people. Energy nets were torn apart by coordinated attacks. Families were reunited. The Vraks, for the first time, retreated. They pulled back to their damaged ships and called for help from orbit. But the victory was not complete. Day one knew more Vraks would come, stronger forces, more weapons. The next battle would be even harder. That night, as the village celebrated, Day one worked on his old communication beacon. He had been repairing it slowly over the months, using parts from the Vraks equipment he captured. Now he had almost everything he needed. Bora found him working by lamplight. She sat down beside him, watching his hands work. "What is this?" "A call for help. To my people. They come, they fight Vraks, save Talon. Your people strong like you?" Day-Wan smiled sadly. Some are not. But they have ships like Vraks, have weapons like Vraks. And they not like when bad people hurt others. Bora was quiet for a moment. "If your people come, you leave?" The question hit Day-Wan hard. He had not thought about it. This village had become his home. These people, these strange tiger aliens, had become his family. Juan, Suk, and Jin were like his own children. Could he leave them? "No," he said finally. "I stay. This is home now." Bora placed her hand on his shoulder, careful with her claws. It was a gesture of acceptance, of family. She clicked something soft, and though Day-Wan's understanding of Talon was still imperfect, he caught the meaning. Brother. She called him brother. 2 days later, Day-Wan finished the beacon. He carried it to the highest point in the village and activated it. The signal burst out into space, carrying a message about the Vraks attack and coordinates to this world. Now they just had to survive long enough for help to arrive. The Vraks came again the next morning. But this time they came with 200 soldiers and gunships and heavy armor. The real war had begun. Legend of the Human and the Tiger Cubs. Part 5. The Vraks gunships appeared like dark birds against the morning sky. Their engines roared as they circled the village, searchlights cutting through the morning mist. On the ground, 200 soldiers in powered armor advanced in formation, their weapons ready. Day-Wan stood on the highest platform, watching them come. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. Beside him stood Juan, Suk, and Jin, the 3 warriors who had once been helpless cubs. Around them, hundreds of Talon waited in hiding, ready to fight for their home. Bora clicked the signal. The battle began. The Talon struck from every direction at once. Arrows flew from hidden positions, targeting the weak joints in Vraks' armor. Warriors dropped from trees onto unsuspecting soldiers, claws finding gaps in their protection. Traps exploded across the jungle floor, scattering the organized formations. The Vraks had expected easy prey. Instead, they found a prepared enemy that knew the terrain and fought with intelligence as well as strength. Day-Wan led his own team toward the Vraks command center, a mobile headquarters protected by heavy shields. He had studied the Vraks for years in the academy. He knew their tactics, their weaknesses, their overconfidence. Juan, Suk, and Jin fought at his side. They had become perfect warriors, combining Talon's strength with the tactics Day-Wan had taught them. They moved as one unit, protecting each other and him. The Vrak soldiers turned their weapons on them. Energy blasts lit up the jungle. But the team was fast, using trees and rocks for cover. Day-One threw a salvage power cell and it exploded near the command center's shield generator. The shields flickered. "Now," Day-One shouted. The 3 warriors charged forward, their claws, enhanced with sharpened metal that Day-One had taught the village smiths to make, tore through the weakened shields. Talon warriors poured through the gap behind them. Day-One reached the communication array. He attached his last explosive device and set the timer. 30 seconds. He ran. The explosion tore through the command center. The Vraks lost their communications, their coordination, their eyes in the sky. Suddenly they were the blind ones in the jungle. But the Vraks were not defeated yet. Their gunships came lower, firing at anything that moved. One blast struck near Suk, throwing her against a tree. She did not get up immediately. Jin roared and dragged his sister to safety while Juan covered them. Day-Wan felt rage burn through him. These people, these aliens who had become his family, were dying. For what, so the Vraks could take slaves? Could steal this world? No. Not while he still breathed. He ran toward his old crash site, his legs screaming in protest. There was one weapon left. One piece of human technology he had saved. The ship's emergency beacon had doubled as a distress flare, powerful enough to blind sensors or burn through light armor. He grabbed it and ran back toward the battle. A Vrax gunship spotted him and turned its weapons his way. Day One did not run. He stood his ground, aimed the flare, and fired. The beam of intense light struck the gunship's sensor array. The pilot, blinded, lost control. The ship crashed into the jungle, exploding in a ball of fire. The other gunships pulled back, suddenly cautious. On the ground, the Talon pressed their advantage. Rena led a charge that broke through the Vrax left flank. Seon and his hunters surrounded another group and picked them off one by one. Young warriors who had trained under Huan, Suk, and Jin fought with courage and skill beyond their years. The Vrax began to retreat. For the first time, they understood they could not win this fight easily. They pulled back toward their landing zone, leaving their dead and wounded behind. But Day One knew this was not over. The Vrax would regroup. They would bring more soldiers. Heavier weapons. They would burn the jungle if they had to. He looked up at the sky, hoping his message had reached someone. Hoping help would come in time. The battle lasted all day. By nightfall, the Vrax had retreated to their landing zone and fortified their position. The Talon had won the day, but the cost was heavy. Many warriors were wounded. Some had died defending their homes. Day One helped Yuna's medical knowledge from his memory to treat the wounded. He showed the Talon healers how to stitch wounds, how to prevent infection, how to set broken bones. He worked through the night, his hands covered in blood, both red and blue. Suk recovered from her injuries. Her thick fur had protected her from the worst of the blast, but she would carry scars. She clicked her thanks to Day One and Jin, who had saved her life. As dawn approached, Day One sat with Bora. The old elder looked tired, her silver fur stained with dirt and blood. But her eyes were still sharp. "We cannot win," she clicked softly. "They have too many. Too strong. Help is coming," Day One said. He had to believe it. "My people will come, and if they do not?" Day One was silent. If help did not come, the Talon would be enslaved or destroyed. And it would be his fault for not doing more, for not saving them. Bora seemed to read his thoughts. She clicked gently, a sound of comfort. "You saved my people already. You saved 3 cubs. You teach us to fight smart. You give us chance. Whatever happens, you are hero to Talon." Before Day One could respond, a sound split the air. A roar that was not animal but mechanical. He looked up and saw lights in the sky. Not Vrax lights, different, familiar. Human lights. 3 warships dropped out of orbit, sleek and powerful. They were Earth Alliance vessels responding to his distress call. Relief flooded through Day One so strongly his legs almost gave out. The warships opened fire on the Vrax position. Energy weapons and missiles rained down with precision. The Vrax tried to fight back, but they were caught between the Talon on the ground and human ships in the sky. It was over in minutes. Vrax soldiers surrendered. Their ships were destroyed or captured. The few who escaped limped back to their main ship in orbit, which jumped to hyperspace before the human fleet could engage. A human shuttle landed in the village clearing. Soldiers in Alliance uniforms emerged, weapons ready but not threatening. An officer stepped forward, looking around at the strange alien village and the gathered Talon warriors. "I'm Captain Yeon. We received a distress signal from this location. Is there a human here?" Day One stepped forward. He was dirty, wounded, and exhausted. He probably looked more like a jungle survivor than a ship captain. "I'm Day One, captain of the Steadfast Horizon. Thank you for coming." Captain Yeon looked him over, then at the Talon surrounding them. "Captain, we're prepared to evacuate you back to human space. We've also established that this world is inhabited by a developing species under attack. The Alliance will provide protection." Day One looked at Bora, at Huan, Suk, and Jin, at the village that had become his home. "I'm not leaving. This is where I belong now." Captain Yeon raised an eyebrow. "Captain, you've been stranded here for over a year. Don't you want to go home?" "I am home." The Alliance officer looked at the 3 tiger-like warriors standing protectively near Day One, at the village full of aliens who watched him with respect and affection. Understanding dawned on her face. "I see. Then we'll make sure this world is protected. No one will threaten your people again." The Earth Alliance declared the planet under protection. They left a small garrison to ensure no Vrax or other hostile forces returned. They provided medical supplies and some basic technology, carefully monitored to not disrupt Talon development. Months became years. Day One aged among the Talon, his hair turning gray, his face lined with wrinkles. But he was happy. He taught new generations of Talon cubs, not just warrior tactics, but also stories of the stars. of other worlds, of the vast galaxy beyond their jungle home. Huan, Suk, and Jin had cubs of their own. They brought them to Daiwan, and he held them carefully, remembering when their parents had been so small. The Talon gave him a name in their language, Claw Brother, the soft one who fought like a warrior, the father of heroes, the bridge between worlds. When Daiwan finally died at the age of 73, the entire Talon nation mourned. They carried his body to the highest tree in the village and built a memorial there. They carved his story into the bark, next to the ancient stories of their own legends. Huan, now an elder himself with silver in his fur, clicked the final words of the ceremony. He was not born Talon, but he lived Talon. He died Talon. He will be remembered forever. Years later, when the Talon finally achieved spaceflight, they named their first starship the Daiwan. When they joined the galactic community, they told everyone about the human who had saved 3 cubs and ended up saving an entire species. The legend of the human and the tiger cubs became known across many worlds. It was a story about courage, about family that transcends species, about one person who refused to give up on those who needed him. And somewhere in the stars, humanity remembered Captain Daiwan not as a ship captain who crashed, but as a hero who showed the best of what humans could be.